So good afternoon, everyone. When Misty asked me to do this a few months back, I have to say I didn't quite realize that I would also be doing an Insight Lab on the same day, in which case I've set a new personal record for presentations at 11, which has been quite an experience. So if I do start rambling on about good data, please stop me. This next session is something that's actually quite dear to my heart because it's been a big part of my early career at Aegis Media, where I focused on building a social analytics practice, which specifically focuses on the topic of really understanding what the value is of really the more undefined metrics, or maybe the ones that aren't necessarily resulting in a direct click or a direct ROI, particularly thinking about how the emergence of new channels and new measures really influence the way that we think about longevity for brand building, and ultimately how it influences in making choices both for the long and medium term. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to my fantastic panel who are going to support me to a great degree today. So thank you very much. Michael.
Great. I'm Michael Webster. I lead our emerging channels team at Ameriprise Financial. We're a financial advisory and asset management company based in Minneapolis. And I think we're supposed to say something interesting about ourselves. So I really struggled with that one for a while. I one time had an ex-girlfriend that tried to run me over with her car.
Oh.
I'll try not to annoy you all today.
Oh, that's tragic. Okay.
I survived.
I'm Cheryl Chin from MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, and I manage our brand marketing campaigns there. Interesting, never been attempted to run over.
Well, we have a little barrier between us. I feel safe.
You know, I really, I've been into my garden lately, so I've been fighting cats and birds and things in my garden every day. So that's kind of what's interesting right now.
I'm Colleen Battle, and I manage global digital marketing for Alcon. Alcon was purchased by Novartis 3 years ago, and so we now have a mix of device, pharma, and OTC all under a big pharma umbrella globally. And probably the most interesting thing I did is I met somebody online 3 years ago and married them within 10 days of knowing them.
Wow.
And I can say that now after 3 years of happily married life, but at the time I didn't tell too many people. It was kind of insane. But
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. I actually also met my wife online through
I should try that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I highly recommend it. So yesterday, Blake from Facebook talked about a data logics integration where clearly I felt, Facebook had worked hard to understand how to quantify the value of some of the things that they do on Facebook. Now, whilst I think those are fantastic initiatives, it does raise a bit of a question in my mind about how do we then compare other things that we might do in social, because we might not be able to apply the same yardstick. So really, the first kind of topic of conversation is really around the rise of social media and ultimately the new measurement challenges that arise with that. And specifically, I'm really keen to hear how our panelists have really approached it from their business perspective and how they've embraced these opportunities. I don't know if you want to start, Michael.
I think what's interesting about social, I'm sure when all of us got started, it wasn't like there was this book that was like how to do social, right? Yep. Or a manual or something like that. There really weren't common standards and measurements in place. And so in a way, we were all like cowboys. We're in Texas, right? I could say that. Moving west, right? And trying to figure out, and it was about faith, I think, at first, right? It was about, do we believe that this is something that is going to impact our business? Are there other things that it relates to that we can try to leverage? And can we enter in a low-risk way that we can try, right? And test it out. And increasingly, I think what's exciting is, maybe some of you are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. It's this idea that when an emerging technology comes out, everybody gets really excited about it. And oh my God, all the wonderful things that it can do. And then they try to do it and they fail. Right? And wow, this is really hard. And what happens over time is that people, more adoption comes behind technologies, and people figure it out, and there are best practices, and there are tools that come into place that help us manage it better and get efficiency out of it. And I think we're at that place now with social media, where we're moving from being cowboys to settlers, right? We're going to stay here a while. And there are tools and practices that are going to help us do that, and do that with discipline, and ultimately be able to prove the value of the investment, which is what we need to do in order to continue to grow.
I will say, well, I think to start with, it's important to know with MD Anderson, our business is one that I think almost everyone would like to avoid. And so no one wants to have to face or encounter cancer. So that poses a challenge in and of itself. So a lot of our work is awareness building, education, and in the times when someone is faced with cancer, then it's getting the right information to them so they can make decisions. So a lot of our social media was trying to figure out what's the goal and the purpose of it. And a lot of it was just starting conversations, but not necessarily meant to be a lead generation or trying to recruit new patients to the center. That wasn't the purpose of the social media. So once we figured out this was a tool for us to engage with people, for them to learn more about the brand, some of the good work that we're doing to prevent cancer, a lot of education, then it became, how do you build an infrastructure in terms of the right people and how much to invest in it? So I think we have a good model now of having a presence in some of the key social media places that we would like to be. The challenge in terms of measurement now becomes understanding and linking it to our business objectives. And so we have, things like in Facebook's all the likes or number of tweets, but what is that in terms of how is it impacting the business? So we're doing things like tracking brand awareness, perceptions, having a lot of listening tools, and being able to try to tie some of the activity that's happening in social media to those business goals like brand awareness and perception, and figuring out how we can link that so that it becomes a really valuable tool for us. But it is a challenge to try to link all of those pieces to those types of brand perception and awareness indicators that we want to track.
I was kind of identifying with Robert at Prudential when we started talking about this panel, because I'm like, you guys know social media at Alcon's like an oxymoron. Because it's highly regulated, and in the early days of Facebook, when we wanted to do things for the brands, legal would come back and say, well, can you lock it down so no one can comment? And we're like, yeah, but that's not really social media. We've gone from that to, if you remember in the recent Winter Olympics when Matt Lauer had pink eye, we're like, we have a product, we should tweet that. And our lawyers are like, well, what if it's not pink eye? What if it's cancer? No, we'd be misdiagnosing. We're like, what? So we miss opportunities because of this regimented environment where the immediacy of social media makes it almost impossible for us to respond. So we're having to approach things a little bit differently. I think we're at a really good place. We're kind of in a new era. We've got a brand new CEO as of basically now. And he's much younger. He's got kids who are 5 and 6, so he's growing up in a digital age as well as his kids. So it's our hope that we're going to kind of go from a more old person kind of led company, which wants to play in the luxury space, but we really do have a lot of customers out there in the regular space to kind of talk about it. So for us, the perfect mix is we have amazing products, and I know a lot about our products, and I'm very passionate about them because I know them really down to the molecule, and I know how great they are, but I'm not allowed to say anything about them in the public space. So it's how do we get our message out to those consumers and patients who use them and are so fantastically pleased with them that they speak for us, because that's really the only way we can get a genuine message out that doesn't have all the words crossed out or have patients saying something like keratoconjunctivitis when they really meant my eyes were dry, stuff like that. So
great. And so in terms of proving a more, say, concrete ROI or an ROI that you could maybe compare across other initiatives, have you found much success in doing that yet, or do you feel that that's still kind of a frontier that needs to evolve to truly get us to that golden grail?
So that's a good question, because I think it's been the common attitude, and I've heard this more than once. So we've got 3 segments of our business. We have pharmaceuticals, over-the-counter, and then surgical devices. We have a very large practice in cataract and refractive surgery equipment and disposables for surgeons, but we also have a product in that segment, which is advanced technology intraocular lenses. So cataract surgery being the most common outpatient surgery done in the United States today, this happens thousands and thousands of times, And most of the time, most of these patients going in don't know that it seems like a lot of money, but for not much more, you can get an advanced lens replacement that will mean you can walk out of surgery without wearing glasses at all and probably see better than your kids. But to market that long chain of decisions, and there's a lot of research that goes into it. They want to understand what it is. For us, then especially in the social media space, we've said, well, we don't see any ROI direct to sales for devices. When we see it, then we'll do it, right? I'm like, well, you're not going to see it until you do it, right? So those are one of the things that we're looking at doing, is trying to create some of those conversations around lifestyle and how the independence, if you will, created by good vision extends that. And then in the contact lens space, of course, that's like a crazy free-for-all. We're doing a bunch of different programs. I know we're doing a bit right now with BuzzFeed, where we do get consumers talking about how great they think our products are, and so we're going to get some uptake from that. But I think, like a lot of us, we want a holistic approach, right? We have to really do the basics and then add that on as a layer.
Great. And so the next kind of core topic is an interesting one in social, I think, because it really can straddle both spheres, right? So thinking about the ability of social to really drive brand building versus driving direct response. So in my career, I've seen lots of fantastic examples. I've seen Dell using Twitter as a direct sales channel. And clearly, you've seen lots of brands who very successfully use things like Facebook to build brand affinity and brand loyalty. So I'd love to hear, how you as an organization think about striking the balance between these two. Clearly, because I think some of the challenges exist is that people would tend to pigeonhole what a channel is supposed to be doing or not. So I'd love to hear how you sort of broach that subject in your business.
Sure. I think, somebody said earlier, and I think it was really true, is, nobody asks you anymore, like, what can you do with email, right? Or what's the ROI of email, right? Social is a way to communicate and connect with people, so it can be used for really any kind of different objective. And so when we think about, a trade-off between using it for brand or using it for DR, I love the customer through all stages of their journey, and it can be used in all of those ways, right? So we can use it from a brand perspective, because brands inspire people and they communicate more powerfully than words can. And we can use it in lots of different touch points with the consumer as they go along their way. Whether that be direct response or digital, or using social in the store, or even in person with someone at the same time. So I don't really think it's a trade-off between these things, but rather how do we use it to help a customer through all stages of their journey, and then ultimately how do we measure the impact that we're having in those different stages that'll help us balance the investment of time and money that it takes to do all of these different touch points.
I think there's a couple things, and I might actually add a third kind of thing that we try to balance. So there's branding, then that direct response. But then also we were having a discussion about a lot of people are using our social media channels or channels that are paid to voice concerns or complaints. And so there may be a customer relationship management that we have to balance there too, or try to do loss cost avoidance. And so if someone gets on our Facebook page or Twitter because they've been sitting in our waiting rooms for 3 hours and they're wanting to get things moving, or maybe they haven't had an appointment, they requested an appointment a couple days ago and they haven't heard back. And so that's often a channel, I won't say often, but it can be used as a channel for people to kind of raise their hand and say, all right, MD Anderson, can you help us in this way? And so being able to balance that kind of service need, which has a cost if you lose a patient or you lose someone, there's a cost to be managed there, as well as the cost of, or the value of building the brand. And so I think we try to balance across all of those because that's how people are using the channels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's particularly tough for us because, as I mentioned before, we have 2 device spaces, contact lenses and cataract and refractive surgery. And before the merger, we didn't have contact lenses. So when we talked about lens in web space, in the search space, in the social space, it meant an intraocular lens inserted via surgery. Now we have a contact lens business. And there's a lot of, this is pretty typical in a corporate, but when you reformulate something or you come out with a new formulation, you come out with a new material for a contact lens, there's enough infighting and poaching of the best terms within a brand family, now let alone two totally different segments. So we are working with iProspect right now on figuring out a strategy on who deserves to win on what keywords in what space. But more than that, sometimes we become a victim of our own success even within that space. We have a number of brands where we have to sit down with them internally and say, you as a franchise have to figure out which brands need and deserve to win in which space. In other words, not totally putting all of your resources behind your brand new product and leaving the product that you launched a year ago in the dust to just pick up the crumbs, because you worked so hard to get this brand loyalty and now you're just going to try to convert them. I mean, that doesn't grow your market. It really just sort of switches out products. So a lot of that is internal conversations and real, education between the brands. And it's a challenge. I'm pretty sure we're not unique in this, but anybody coming into a large corporation is thinking about their career. So we have a lot of basically musical chairs among product managers. They might manage one brand 1 year and then move to another brand the next year. And so trying to make sure that they keep up with that conversation around that balance is really, really important. And I won't say that we do it very well right now, but there's certainly more of an understanding that it needs to happen. So that's the beginning of the conversation.
Great. So that leads quite nicely into the sort of next area, really thinking about the balance of short-term versus long-term. I've often found that with emerging channels, it's often the temptation to take a very short-termist approach to things, and I think in many ways we are very short-termist as an industry. But how would you really approach the concept of how to view a channel in the context of a long or a short-term strategy? Because clearly, there will be potentially a lot of testing, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around how you might approach that.
I think you have to have short and long-term goals, right? So long-term goals are about achieving a vision, they're about achieving a direction. Yeah. They give purpose to what you're doing, they inspire and challenge people. Anytime you put the word strategy in a meeting title, everyone's going to show up. But the problem, I think, with long-term goals is it's difficult to see how you're progressing against them. Obviously, your tactics and things can change over time. Sometimes they're hard to measure. And so the short-term goals, I think, are great, because what they do is they let you focus on a particular area at a particular time. You can see if you're really making any progress towards what that long-term vision is, and you can switch out your short-term goals to focus on an area where you're having trouble. So I really think in our space, yes, it's a rapidly evolving space, and so our short-term goals have to rapidly evolve, but we still have to have a reason for being there, and we still have to have a vision of what it is that we want to achieve.
And just to piggyback on that, because I think that's a good point, is understanding what your organization's fundamental objectives and goals are. So if I take MD Anderson, we say our goal ultimately is to end cancer, eliminate it, wipe it from the face of the earth. That's a long-term goal. And so there are things that we do to advance that mission. And so there's a lot of education. There's a lot of what do you do to prevent cancer? And we look at all the channels that we can go into, whether they're emerging or traditional, to fulfill that and to get those messages out. And so I think that's just important, and that's always going to be a goal. And so the things like if you say education is one of the goals or one of the longer term goals of the organization, people are starting to use Pinterest for recipes. And so, or do we start to get into that space because that's how they learn to eat better or live healthier. And so that may make sense as a long-term strategy, but who knows what Pinterest is going to be, where it's going to be in 5 years. It may still be here, but it may not, but that strategy will still probably be the same for us. And so it's a constant evaluation of what are the right tools and staying kind of close to the ground so that you can put the right kind of mix of emerging tools and technologies in your plan. Same thing for short terms. If you have a goal, my colleague here, Dana, she does a lot of service line management, and so she may have a doctor or a physician call her and say, we have an opportunity for X cancer, and so what are the things that you can do immediately? And she may have to choose a whole other set of tools to find those people immediately. And so you just kind of have to balance behind what the organization's goals are, and then kind of pick the tools that are at our disposal to meet those goals.
Well, we've had a lot of long-term goals that feel like they're getting longer every day. Some things take a long time, and in a big organization where basically your corporate leadership wants to make sure that you're using the synergistic value of having single systems, that tends to slow everything down, because then your channel points to get those systems implemented are pretty lumbering. And yeah, I had a boss that once said she'd have a old white beard before certain things were done, and she was probably right. But what we try to do is, for example, around the whole idea of being nimble in the short-term plan, is you really do have to have a long-term plan to be prepared to be responsive in the short term. So we know we don't move on a dime, we know we won't. I think the answer to some of that, in my opinion, is to be able to get the proper training and database access for what we can say in the space available to the local marketer, and give them kind of like a certificate of trust. There's been a long kind of standing tension between the marketer and our legal and regulatory approvers, where the marketer wants to push fast, and it's really the job of our regulatory and legal folks to slow it down. So that tension basically creates a slowness to market that's not very effective in our marketing and advertising. So one of the things in our long-term plan was to take a look at our what we call our promotional review committee, our PRC review. What happens with that, why it takes so long, and how can we shorten it. And really, this is a really simple value of X if you think about it. The relationships you have with the people internally are really going to help you move that along. It's not just, throw up your hands and like be frustrated at the process. It's frustrating for even the people who are reviewing. So what we've found success with is sitting down, buying their lunch if we have to, and saying, what is it that you're really, really concerned about? And as we build, at least in our team, a trust that says we're not going to do anything that's going to cause red risk for the company, then they're going to actually trust us to do a little bit more, and they're not going to be like looking at the fine print on everything, because they know we have their back, rather than them thinking that they've always got to see who's going to color outside the lines. So those relationships we're working on for the long term, we're also taking a look at some of the simple infrastructure, like, can we really route this via email? Do we really all have to get in a room for 4 hours every week just to look at some small segment? And then the longer term is, we've got a long ways to go at Alcon in terms of implementing a modern CMS that will actually be responsive. We have challenges in our local markets for them to be able to be responsive to and not be so centrally heavy. I live in a lot of the times, I don't know where I got the skill set of probably growing up, never having the right ingredients to make anything, right? So you have to figure out what you can substitute. And it's a little bit like that, right? You have internal clients that don't have the budget, or they might have the budget, or they don't have the time. And so you go, well, I know what your ideal solution is, but if you need something right now, here's what we think the best options are. So it's giving them something that they can do immediately, which is really, really important. And a lot of times that is just foundational. So we set for a long term a foundation that says you really shouldn't be playing in the social space, you shouldn't be playing in the paid search space unless you do the basics like SEO, like truly separating your content from your code so that you can globalize, things like that. So that's kind of what we do, is we say, look, we're going to set a few base rules that everybody has to follow, and we're doing better on getting some kind of consistency across the company. I think 6 years ago, you would probably never know some products were made by Alcon, because there was no brand consistency in even how the brand was applied on a brand site. So we've come a long way. We still have a ways to go, but we're working on it. So
And so the next subject is kind of a meaty one. And I chose to bring it up more because there's a lot of talk of like how you get a more holistic view, particularly in the field of digital. I think attribution modeling is in many ways expanding beyond sort of traditional or non-traditional channels like digital. I'd love to hear how you think attribution modeling may help to solve some of the challenges in terms of defining the value of X within this context. And even if it's not a direct experience, I'd love to hear what your general opinion on the matter is.
Want me to jump? Okay. Well, I think this is probably one of the most exciting things because, we have always had a struggle with, and I know many of you have, is in terms of, all right, we can track some of the digital things. We can track things to someone's getting to our website, exploring content, maybe even submitting an appointment. But oftentimes, it's our offline media that may be a real challenge for us to measure. So what's the impact of television, or what's the impact of print or sponsorship? And so I think, just thinking long-term about attribution, what I think is going to be able to happen is, a lot of it is really going to be how well we are in the upfront of tagging and tracking everything and what you put into the model. But if we can do it in a smart way, and I think this provides the tools to do it, you load your media plans and you say, okay, here's what we're doing with display on these sites, and here are the messages, here's what we're doing in paid search. And we're really actually working with iProspect now on some of this with our paid search campaign. Or if you have broadcast, can you send people to a unique URL and put that in the model as well, and then be able to now differentiate and see what is leading to these conversions. And so the smarter that we can be about kind of classifying and coding everything up front, I think it can be a really useful tool for us. But again, it's kind of contingent upon the work that we do up front.
Great.
Yeah, we're at the very beginning of attribution modeling, and I'm excited about it too. For us, I think the biggest barrier to actually moving forward in a real way with attribution modeling is our lack of internal communication with each other. Things get very siloed, and so you can see something really happening in your analytics and have no idea why. Like, what's driving traffic there because someone decided to go rogue and go do something because they got tired of waiting. And then you're like, well, I had a recent experience. One of my main platforms is the B2B platform that we have, and the most mature version we have of that is for US. And I was seeing quite a significant rise in mobile traffic to the site, which didn't quite fit our demographics. So if your main target audience is surgeons and office staff, you're figuring they may access it from tablet, but they probably are on a desktop if they're accessing online ordering. So to have a 300% increase in a month and a half was a little bit odd. And I guess I got excited about it without looking too close. And then a month later, I found out that somebody had named a consumer rebate program with the same part of the same domain string that was on my site. So I was actually getting consumers coming to the site searching for rebates when that would be like a fruitless search. So not only did that decision, lack of communication, now create a problem for me because I'm going to need to put a modal window up there that literally asks them, because they're not reading, are you a consumer, are you a patient?
Now you can be an affiliate marketer. You can send that traffic over.
There you go. And so I'll have to send them somewhere else. But it's that kind of siloed approach that, for us, our biggest challenge really is communicating robustly inside the company about what we're doing. And I don't know how to get around that, because what we've said really literally this year is maybe we need to do a few less things and do a lot more talking about what we're doing, because it will pay off in the end. So.
And so kind of building on that, I think testing is an area, particularly for new and emerging channels, that can provide some fantastic insight. So I'd love to hear how you think about testing within emerging channels can help to build business cases for either further investment or really to help you understand how you best sort of evolve the way that you think about leveraging a new channel.
Can't be me first every time.
How about Colleen this time?
Yeah,
Shall
you
we go again,
first
Colleen?
this time.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
Yeah, oh, well, we don't really do a lot of A/B testing, probably because it just takes so long to get to A testing that we never get to B. But we are really trying to get more agile. So I do believe we have great digital leadership at our company, and she likes to coin, to repeat the phrase, launch, learn, and pivot. Done is better than perfect. So in other words, let's just get something out there. It may not be perfect. Launch, learn, and pivot really has a nimble idea to it, and that is we may not know if this works, but we're going to do it, and then we're going to see if it works, and then we're going to tweak it. So that's helped some. The A/B testing model being more sophisticated, I am looking forward to maybe getting our IT team to do a little bit more of the JavaScript insertion, things like that. But I don't play a lot in the media space, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. This whole conference has caused me to think I need to talk to our media buyer and find out exactly everything that they're doing. But I know they do some of those things, but they're typically pre-market focus groups, and they're not really live in the moment. So we have a lot of opportunity for growth there.
We probably test that nauseum. Oh my gosh. But it's been good. I mean, and we're trying to weed out a couple of things. And so before we even get into like in-market testing, we're probably doing a lot of just concept testing in the first place to make sure we're even in the right lane. So is this, and partially because we're dealing with a subject that is really, it can be sensitive and invoke a lot of emotion. And so when it comes to messaging, we might just test before we even put something out into market to make sure we're, like, again, we're on the right highway. And then once we kind of get that, okay, we have some ideas here that are fruitful or can be fruitful, then you have a couple of things. One is, what are the right spaces? And so we're testing messages against different medium. So is it a Hulu versus Facebook versus Pandora versus, all the different media, and testing messages in there. And so does one medium work better than the other when you look at the messages? And then also within the channels, does one message, one look, concepts, perform better than another? So if we're talking about prevention, is it that an apple does well versus someone jogging, or someone just texts to say be fit? Which of these types of things work within the channel? So there's a lot of testing going on, and then what's leading to more clicks or more conversions or donations? So there's a lot of real life testing, kind of in real time testing in market, and then constant optimizations based on that on a weekly, daily basis, because we're getting a lot of good input there. So, and I will say, we've done a lot of that. A real life example is with our paid search. So we used to, I won't tell you the whole story, but we end up now with the learning saying, okay, people search by cancer types or symptoms. And so that was something that we got from kind of testing, and then being able to apply it to our other mediums and saying, okay, well, in our display advertising or in our microsite, showing content served up by the symptoms or types of cancer, that's how people are looking and searching for information. So being able to take those learnings and then apply it to our other spaces has really been critical and successful.
So
Do you want me to answer, or are we out of time?
Michael, I think just a quick word from you.
Okay.
And then I think we can wrap it up.
I'll
You've
try.
been so patient.
I think, we test all the time, particularly on the content side, and that's brought us a lot of value. I think what's funny, actually, is getting the discipline to test in the first place.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of controversial to some extent, because people will say, well, I developed all of this content, and then you tested it, and now you're not going to use it, right? That's like a failure, almost on me. And I like to tell them, no, the failure is when you put something out there and it doesn't work, right? That's the failure. And so I think just understanding that it's okay to test, it's okay for something not to pass, and then not just using the knowledge in that particular execution, so this thing did better and we're going to do that, but rather trying to understand the reasons why it did better, so that you can bring those lessons very early on into the content development process, and hopefully save your resources in the long term.
Great. So listen, I think this concludes our session. I want to thank my panelists for being so frank and open. and really leading some lively discussion. Thank you.